Hey, I'm Johnny Irian. We are here at the Stationery Factory in Dalton, Massachusetts. I'm here with my good buddy, Mr. John Marks.
Glad to be here.
Good to see you, man.
Same here.
I can't believe it's been a year since Solid Sound.
Yeah, Solid Sound. What a cool festival, organized by Wilko every 2 years.
Amazing.
At this great art museum, Mass MoCA in Western Mass.
Love it.
Yeah, incredible.
And now here we are. We can't go see live shows.
No music festivals.
Yeah.
But you had a great idea in the middle of that last year to kind of get two writers together to talk.
I've been a big fan of Jeff's songwriting for a long time, and a fan of the band, a fan of your writing.
And he just come out with that autobiography, Let's Go So We Can Get Back, which is really a writer's book, right? It's like written by somebody who's really focused on what it means to sit down every day and do that work. And it's going to be inspiring, I think, for a lot of readers.
Absolutely. There's a bunch of nuggets in that interview.
For sure.
I think you're going to dig it. Let's watch
check it out.
Please come closer to the
So let's jump in. I thought one of the things I loved about your book was reading that you yourself are an avid reader. And you talked about, stuff like Finnegan's Wake and William Gass's stuff. But I wonder if you have a recollection of the book you read that made you a reader, or say maybe the first book you read that was more of an adult book where you're like, oh my gosh, this is...
I think my earliest memories of reading were magazines. My mom we didn't really have a lot of books in the house. We had magazines, and we had a World Book Encyclopedia. And I was really convinced when I was growing up that was actually all of the world's knowledge, and it was a miracle that you could have it in your house. And I would sit at our dining room table, and I think I read the World Book Encyclopedia from A to Z. And then they would do an update every year. Once a year, you'd get a yearbook, and it would be all the new knowledge, So that's my earliest reading, is like just going through this.
Those are great. Those World Book Encyclopedias.
Yeah. The other thing that I feel like happens a lot in a young boy's life growing up in Illinois is you're introduced to the mythology of Abraham Lincoln, and you always take a field trip to Springfield when you're in grade school. And I remember getting a book of Abraham Lincoln humor or anecdotes or something like that. It's pretty rustic. All of my early reading is pretty rustic. It was that, and I think maybe the first thing I read that felt like it was adult or different than the entertainment that was on TV or something like that was Tom Sawyer was a Disney movie.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then I wanted to read the book, and read Huckleberry Finn, which was much more, it was just so much more engaging than the TV show.
Yeah.
So, and when my family also, we lived close enough to Hannibal, Missouri, so that was another destination, like weekend outing type of place. So there was always some connection to the actual author, I guess, when I was a kid.
That's really interesting. So you write a lot about the trains, but you're in that kind of world of the Mississippi River and of that kind of Mark Twain universe. It feels like some of what you're saying here.
Well, it was a mythology that was being promoted. And as a really young boy, it made sense. And you could see the river and you could see the train tracks. And my dad worked on the railroad, and it felt like it matched up a little bit. But as I got older, it started to come apart as being more mythologized and being an imagined past, and also maybe whatever was real about it starting to fade,
Yeah. Well, speaking of trains, so one of my transcendent rock moments of my life was at Solid Sound 4 years ago. It was a Saturday night Wilko performance, and this is all going towards trains.
Okay.
You just mentioned trains, so we're waiting. I think there was a full moon, and all of a sudden, off in the distance, a train whistle. Then the train comes around the corner. There's like even a plume of smoke coming out. It blasts into our existence. And just at the right moment, Wilko kicks into the set. It was the most unbelievable. So I'm going to have to ask you, did you know that train? Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember that?
We opened every show like that for like, no, I'm just kidding.
Only near trains. I mean, the train was, right there on the side of the hill.
Yeah.
And the stage was down below.
Yeah.
So it was literally like you had timed it with the railroad. And this was before I knew anything about your connection to the railroad.
Yeah. I think it was just one of those, beautiful coincidences that happens.
Well, let me just tell you that I talked with someone else who was there that night, and we both had the same impression. So whatever happened, it will never, that's indelible.
I won't disillusion anyone. We scoured the train schedules. We called. No, I think it just worked out that way. That's happened a few times when you play close to train tracks and you play outside, or even sometimes inside. Train tracks train noises insinuate themselves into rock performances. Like play places where the subway shakes the building at certain times. And you don't really make any mental note of it when it happens at a point in the show where it doesn't mean anything. But I've been playing long enough that has happened in a coincident moment where it's added to the show quite a bit.
I mean, truly. Well, I would just say that when I read the passages about your upbringing in Belleville, I thought of that immediately, and I wondered, I want to ask you about that record that your dad listened to, but the whole idea, trains are so hardwired into a certain part of American culture and American music in particular. I hear the train a-comin', train kept a-rollin', and on, the record of the old 97, and it feels to me like even a lot of that music, certain kinds of music were almost written to the rhythm of trains, and I just wonder if, aside from all the association with the actual railroad in your life and family, do you think there's any impact that just the sound of trains or that world of the trains that you grew up in had on your sensibility as a musician?
Yeah, I think it's easy to romanticize some of that stuff. I mean, it definitely, trains are pretty impressive, and the power of those rhythms when you're really close to a train, or even watching trains go by at an intersection, which where I grew up, there are lots and lots of trains going by all the time. Your car's always stopped waiting for a long train to go by. And it's because St. Louis and East St. Louis is where, I guess, is like one of the largest concentrations of track in North America is like right there. So the other thing that I remember from growing up a lot is not having air conditioning, sleeping with windows open, and hearing trains in the distance a lot, which I don't know. I don't know of a lonelier sound than that. That's a really lonely sound to me. So that feels the same way I feel like a lot of music I've made I've tried to make it feel, if that makes any sense. But that doesn't, but I would stop short of like really trying to tie what I do into some sort of idealized version of America or Americana, I really bristle at that idea, because I just think it's cheap. It's a little easy, and it works for a lot of people for sure. But I just feel like it's dishonest to me,
The romance of the train, the idea that sort of that roots idea, I mean, what you're talking about is more of a much more tactile sense of this sound that you heard. It's very personal and connected to your life. It's not this larger kind of romantic portrait.
Well, I think that people, when they try and attach themselves to some you know, iconography of the past, they are, you know, basically trying to appropriate that authenticity, or, you know, trying to use it as a you know, to symbolize or signify some validity in what they're pursuing. But I think people living modern lives, figuring out how to make things work, is way more interesting and way weirder than the shorthand of a lot of I know, folk music and a lot of, like, you know, the tropes that attach themselves to. Well, all music has that, you know, like heavy metal has to have the devil or whatever, you know, like, but the train, unfortunately, is very real for me, and it's at the same time something I've distanced myself from, because it's first of all, rhyming rain and train is like, you know, it's pretty much the end of your career. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but, you know, like, it's a joke in the studio. I say all the time, like, well, have I rhymed rain with train yet?
Yeah, well, there's that David Allan Coe song.
Oh, yeah.
You Never Call Me By My Name, in which he basically has a truck.
Steve Goodman.
Steve Goodman wrote
Yeah.
that song. Yes, like, he actually says it. Yeah. And I think he says the truck is in the rain and gets hit by a damned old train.
Yeah, exactly.
So tell me what the reality was for you. You grew up in a family of railroad workers. Your father and your brothers all worked.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but it's not like they were wearing bib overalls and chewing tobacco and sitting. They actually, they kind of were sometimes, but it was that is definitely the milieu I grew up in. I was like, my uncles, my cousins, my brothers, everybody worked on the railroad, and they all worked in very different areas of the railroad. Some of my cousins rode maintenance trains all over North America, fixing track. My brother worked on basically like a chain gang, a track, you know, section team that would lay track. And my dad worked underneath trains when he started out, and eventually worked in the tower at a switching yard, which was a pretty high up position, and became a company man. And so there was also company men and union men in my family, which was a early introduction to those, you know, discrepancies. But my life is, you know, MTV, growing up in like early days of cable, when my, you know, friends had cable, and it was like unbelievable that there were that many stations. And, you know, we never had air conditioning until I moved out. So you go to your friends' houses with air conditioning and cable in the basement. There was a lot of that changing, small town world being kind of exposed to, I don't know, something a little bit broader, but also it wasn't evenly spread out. There was a hierarchy to it.
We talked about your reading in this world you grew up in. Let's talk about your songwriting for a moment. I mean, one of the things you write about in your book is this idea that you had one of your superpowers was vulnerability. Your ability to kind of be very open and to risk being made fun of or whatever in order to get this thing on your chest out. And I'm just sort of imagining you doing this and growing up in a world where it sounds like there was some music in your environs. I guess Jay Farrar's family had that. But it seems like you must have figured out pretty early, I'm not afraid to do that. Or how did that happen?
It's such a weird thing, because I wrote that in the book, and it's been, I've been asked about it a few times, and it definitely feels true You know, that's why I put it in the book. There is a comfortable relationship I have with vulnerability. And at the same time, when I hear someone say it back to me, I'm like, I'm the most self-conscious person in the world. It's a different thing though. I guess I'm like self-conscious because I'm always thinking, I'm up in my head, and I'm trying to picture not necessarily what someone else is seeing, but what I would look like if I could see myself or something, you know, and I don't know why those things are different, but
Like there's a second camera off to the
like
side.
an observing,
watching
an observing ego or something, you know, and at the same time, yeah, like it says in the book, I didn't understand people not being able to cry publicly. I didn't understand why people didn't want to talk about their feelings. You know, I think I probably had a tough time with a lot of friendships because there was an intensity to what I was comfortable being, I don't know, talking about and being immersed in, as opposed to, I'm not trying to portray other people as having some small-minded, small talk all the time, or whatever. Obviously there were deep connections you could form with people, and for people formed with each other. But I think I just wore people out. I just think I didn't have that side that could balance some sort of, you know, maybe lighter approach to walking through life. So yeah, I think it was probably somewhat debilitating, and the only way to cope with it was to embrace it, and music seemed like a pretty efficient way to embrace it, you know, because it was, you know, to my ears, that was all built on the stuff that I'm thinking about and talking about.
How did you first start? I mean, you write very eloquently about those early songs, and it's striking to me that at a very young age you could produce something like Screen Door.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I know you write on that as an early kind of maybe immature effort in the
Mm-hmm.
book, but when I heard that, one of the things I thought right away was, wow, now my dad listened to Leadbelly and Woody Guthrie when I was growing up. And so, of course, I'd heard all the attempts to kind of do that sort of thing. And I loved Dylan's stuff that was in that vein. But that was the first song of my generation that I heard where I really thought, that's real. That's like somebody doing something I wouldn't have thought could be done in our generation.
Oh.
Because we're so far removed from all that.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a powerful song to me. So how did it... So, you know, I'm just curious about it. It seems to me that part of being able to do that song is not being afraid to go there.
Well, I also didn't know what I was doing. I mean, a lot of times people stop doing something because they've been taught that it's hard, or that they can't do it, or that it's not something that anyone can do, or whatever. But I didn't have that. I didn't know that was a hard thing to do, to be incisive and relate in a universal way something in a simple folk song or something like that. I just thought that well, if I play guitar and I want to write songs, that's what you're supposed to do. I don't think that song's great. I don't like that song very much. But when I listen to it now, there is a lot more going on than I give myself credit for, or gave myself credit for at the time. I mean, I definitely still see what I was trying to get other people to see.
Right.
You know, so, and that is hard. I think that is hard, so I can be proud of that, and at the same time feel like now I have to push harder because I know it's hard, and I want to do more than that. But there's a beginner's mind thing to some of those earlier songs.
Well, is that the way you feel about New Madrid? Or do you feel, because to me one of the things that, I promise you I'm not going to just linger on those songs, but the jump from Screen Door to New Madrid is to me, that's some kind of huge leap. Your ability to take the sound of that song and marry it to truly mysterious lyrics that feel nevertheless authentic and real. I mean, that, I don't know, how do you regard that song these days?
I play that song a lot, and it really holds up, especially of the new of the Uncle Tupelo material. I still feel a connection to it, and it actually is a lot more rooted in some real thing than maybe it sounds like, because there was a prediction of a massive earthquake that was going to happen at the New Madrid Fault, and that the last time it happened, the river ran backwards. And Ivan Browning was this guy that was making this prediction, and because they were making this prediction, it was the early days of cable news. So CNN was there, and not where we lived, but close, in this little town called New Madrid. And I just was kind of fascinated with the idea that city people were going to be interacting and living amongst the people in New Madrid, and I was just wanting someone to meet and fall in love. I mean, I don't know. And now I think that I still feel the same way. I think there's such a divide between those two worlds in general in our country, and they don't understand each other very well. So that's what the song means to me now. But back then, I was trying to write a topical folk song. I was trying to write something that was ripped from the headlines.
It's just funny because I think it's the marriage of those two things that makes it such a mysterious and powerful song.
Mm-hmm.
I knew a little bit about the New Madrid earthquake, but first of all, I can't explain if that song brings me close to tears whenever I hear it, because it feels like it's touching on something that it has no right to touch on, given that it's a topical song about something that actually happened. Taking history and making it feel powerfully close to you, that strikes me as a very hard thing to do.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think the thing that I recognize that I did in that song, that I do in a lot of songs, is at some point I just give up on trying to make some broader statement and focus on holding on to someone's arm, or something. You know what I mean? Like that human connection is going to transcend any of that moment in time, anything else I'm trying to provide imagery-wise is going to always mean less to me than that moment where just hold on to my arm,
I want to ask you about something you wrote here that in the book that fascinates me, and that is this question, this idea that when you have a song in your head that's just coming to you, it's sort of limitless. And it's this idea that somehow you're ruining it. When you start to release it, it's ruined. And it really, throughout reading your book, as I was reading forward, I was really kind of struggling with that idea, because in my mind I would almost say, okay, but isn't creating a great song actually discovering exactly the ways to limit it? Like, in other words, I would have thought that part of that process is, okay, there's all these things that can happen, but I'm going to make these choices that limit it down to this thing that's going to be, and when that's happening at its peak form, you get a great song. But what you're arguing is sort of in a way that the limitlessness of what you have in your head. But I want to make sure I understand what you're getting at there, because it's a really interesting idea that I guess I didn't fully grasp.
Well, if you focus it all on communication and like this effort, this desire to reach out and have a human connection, to make a connection and be a part of a dialogue, and even a part of a dialogue with yourself. Once you've narrowed it down to what it is, the conversation ends, and I mourn that. I think that it's one of the reasons I enjoy performing live, because it's a way for the conversation to reignite and continue. But for yourself, you're lost in this world where you're having this conversation and trying to figure out what it is that you're getting at. And I'm just not a person that ever feels like I've completely, gotten at what I'm trying to get at. I think it's pretty ineffable what I'm trying to get at most of the time, and ultimately I fail. You want to wrap your arms around the world and just like make everybody feel how much love you want to give to them, or like how much you want to embrace people and share your strength or share your intellect or whatever, or just be connected, And when that sentence ends, when that song ends, and that song is completed, I just feel like I have to start another one to continue that conversation, because it's behind you.
It's funny you should bring up the live performance, because I was thinking about that as kind of a way of thinking about what you're getting at, and the way that a song, when you perform it live, it's almost like you release it back out into some larger realm of possibility. And I think about those, San Quentin performance, Johnny gets on vinyl with Johnny Cash, and you hear the audience kind of taking that thing over. And actually, in your case, I saw you sing a solo acoustic set in Northampton right after we moved there in 2005. And I had not really, some of the songs that you were singing, many of them off Summer Teeth, the audience, without you coaching them, without saying, hey, why don't you all take a part, we're providing your backup harmonies.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really heard that before, and I hadn't really expected that to happen necessarily with your songs, so many of which are very sophisticated pop in some ways, but no, the audience it just sort of rose like wind in the auditorium, and I thought, wow, something amazing is happening here. When did you first realize that was happening, and what did that feel like?
I don't know. I mean, I've been playing solo acoustic shows almost as long as Wilko's been around, and I've always felt really, I feel like it's always been really important to be reminded of, the core task, even when I'm in Wilko, is to put a song across with my voice and just a guitar, and to be able to isolate that and really focus on it. I love working on that. I love exploring that. The singing, the background parts, on one hand, I really enjoy, and it means a lot to me. On the other hand, I've been trying to get more and more adept at performing or creating songs that don't need the audience to imagine what was on the record for them to be put across. So in other words, I want to write songs that people haven't ever heard before, and still carry all of that melodic information, and or at the very least the lyrics come through. You see a lot of acoustic performances, and myself included, where this is where the guitar solo was, but it doesn't have two sets of hands and two guitars right now. So there's this obvious thing that's missing, but one of the beautiful things about people immersing themselves in your records is they hear it still. They're creating it in their head. On one hand, again, that's beautiful. On the other hand, I shouldn't have to rely on that. I'm failing at some part of my job.
That's how you see it when you hear those. That's like one thought in your head.
No, I mean it sounds
like pure tribute.
It sounds beautiful. No, it is pure tribute, but it makes me. I really have a very, very, very narrow idea of what a good song is, and if it needs something that's not there, then it's not as good of a song as the songs that I sing that don't need those other parts, to me.
Okay. Well, then should we say here, like, either way, I love Warm. That's a fantastic record.
Thank you.
But should we go ahead and convey now to the audience that will watch you perform those songs? Listen, let's not have those harmonies. Don't do that to Jeff.
That's not what I'm trying to say at all.
I know. I hear you. It's just it's fascinating because obviously it's both.
I
for you, right?
have a very different I mean, I feel like I'm trapped between a couple of different worlds as a performer. I mean, there are obviously performers that live for the audience that can give it up to a degree that I am not comfortable with. You know, just like a David Lee Roth entertainer. There's like, I always look at David Lee Roth as one end of this spectrum because he's just such a natural ham, you know, born to be doing what he's doing. And no one would ever doubt for a second that he belongs there doing that thing. Whatever you think of the music or his voice or anything, he's fucking entertaining, man. You know, like,
Yeah.
and then there are, you know, the other end of the spectrum would be, I guess, like Dylan or somebody you picture as not having any shits to give at all about whether the audience has appreciated what they're doing. And I'm not saying that that's the reality, but that's what the perception is, you know. And I'm somewhere where I think I fall on closer to in the spectrum to David Lee Roth, strangely enough, because unlike a lot of other people from my generation, like punk rock infused childhood or whatever, I really feel like it's an amazing place to be put in your life, to where you get to complete a circuit for an audience that is going to bring them so much happiness and joy. And I think that I'd be a dick to not revel in that activity, you know, being able to do that. And it's a balance, though, because you can't just keep doing that and grow as an artist and move forward. You can't just keep reaffirming that audience connection. But we've never turned our backs on it either. You know, like I know a lot of artists have, you know, like, oh, I don't do any of our early stuff, or like there's hardly anything that I've stopped playing completely, or any eras of my life that I've completely rejected. And it's not because I haven't rejected it on some level as a songwriter. It's because I don't think it's my call to make completely. I think if people pay to come see me perform, they're making that call too. And I don't know, what an amazing thing to, how many people get to do that? How many people get to make people happy, you know, with something like that?
I want to ask you about, you know, this idea in the book, when you were with Uncle Tupelo, there was a sound that you were trying to hit that was somehow a narrowing in. And when I read that idea, I thought, well, is he talking about a certain kind of distillation of a sound? And then with Wilko, it's almost like an opening out. And I understand what you're getting at, but I wonder if you could sort of convey, maybe just talk a little bit about what you mean by those two things.
Well, I have spent a great deal of my life admiring and emulating, or wishing to emulate, people that appear to have it all figured out, like the Ramones, you know, that have chosen what they're going to do. Or maybe they haven't chosen, it's just what they do, and they've stood by it and they've refined it, but for the most part, it came out fully formed and it's there. And then there are other people that have taken, you know, been able to be more disciplined in the way that they're approaching their art and how they present themselves to the world. And I've never had that kind of energy for that narrowing down. I just have a natural curiosity and a natural skepticism that anything that I'm able to figure out how to do, I should probably move on and figure out something else to do, because it's not that great, you know. But at some point, I felt like I formulated it into some philosophy that made me feel a little bit better, because I don't have to be any of those people that made those decisions, or have that discipline, or have that clarity of vision. I can have a clear vision for myself that it's a good thing to love more, to appreciate more, to embrace more. And from that point on, that's what I feel like Wilko has been to me, has been, well, I didn't like this 14 years ago, but that jazz solo in that song is pretty sweet. You know, and I think it throws some people off sometimes because there isn't a clear aesthetic vision being promoted. But in a way, there is. There is the underlying philosophy is that maybe we don't have to keep narrowing things down. Maybe we could be happier if we could just be able to tolerate more or learn to appreciate more.
I wonder if I could ask you, I know, Wilco has been a variety of constellations of bands. For the last few years, it seems like it's pretty well fixed.
Mm-hmm.
But in the earlier period, there was Jay Bennett who came and went, and others. And I wonder, what's your sense about kind of the fluidity of Wilco as a band? You sort of write about this in the book that maybe nothing is entirely fixed. That you kind of, it's not like your family at home.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think about the band?
Well, I think it's a liberating thing for myself, somebody that grew up worshiping the idea of a band. It's liberating to realize that it's stupid. It's not that. It's an agreed upon fiction, like anything else that you give a name, like a sports team. There's like 20 different guys each year, but you're going to have an allegiance to this team because you've agreed upon the fiction that this name means something to this city or whatever. Bands are very similar to that to me, And at the same time, you can't deny that there is a deep connection some people form with their idea of your band. And I'm not quite sure how that functions in people's lives, but it seems similar to the way a sports team's allegiance might function. There's some, I don't know, there's some sense that their support is helping you succeed, or that you're doing something that requires their belief too, and that in that way, it's like I don't know, maybe it is kind of what I was talking about with the audience, that they're weighing in a way. So there's some layer of it that's maybe silly, but at the same time, pretty profound, It's like, so, but yeah, at the end of the day, ultimately, I don't have to worry about that the way I worry about my family. That's my concern. If a guy in a band decides they want to go be in a different band or do something else, that's a survivable scenario. That doesn't even register as a blip on the scale of suffering that you're going to go through in your life.
Let me ask you about the way that, Johnny, you can let me know when we need to shift gears. Your book and Warm, the record, there's a kind of symbiosis, it seems like, between those two things. Can you talk about how, is it that they both impacted each other, or was it really that the book really helped shape the songs on that record? How do you see that work?
I really think that getting over my fear of writing prose, which has been daunting to me for most of my life, the idea that tell concise stories, and maybe it's because it's an autobiography and it doesn't have to be a literary classic. You just want to be truthful and clear and get people to see what you're trying to show them. And but being comfortable writing prose, I think to stay in that frame of mind when I was writing the lyrics for the record, I put in a few more hours of revision or something than I normally would to get the songs to have that same kind of incisiveness, you know, some sort of clarity that I could say what the song was about, where I don't think that's necessary. I don't think a song has to be about something, but for the period where I was writing the book, it made it easier to finish the lyrics when I could say, oh, this song is about this, almost like I was staying in the mindset of a chapter or something.
When you're talking to younger songwriters, I wonder if you give them any advice about how, what they need, you know, and I can imagine that you're hesitant to give advice to younger artists, but I wonder, what do you tell people who may say, look, I'm just starting out, how do I even go about doing this?
Well, I actually talk about it all the time because my kids both want to write songs and they both aspire to be creators, and they have a lot of questions and they get frustrated. My younger son in particular can hear and envision way beyond what he's able to do technically, and that's very frustrating, and I can relate to that, you know. But I think if you want to write songs, you're going to write songs. If it's something that you can't picture yourself not doing, it's going to happen. But there are a lot of practical things you can tell people that aren't just, you know, pretending it's some mysterious act also. You know, like, well, do you write every day? You know, do you pick up your pencil a lot? Do you play your guitar every day? Because if you don't do those things, you're not going to write as many songs as somebody that does do those things, and you're not going to progress as quickly or at a speed that you're going to be even able to notice, maybe, if you don't develop some of those habits. Yeah.
The act of writing, the act of doing the thing a lot is critical to doing the thing.
If you want to write songs, listen to a lot of songs. You know, love songs. You want to write poetry, read poetry. I mean, it's like, it's so obvious that it's almost silly to say, but it's really beyond almost anything else. That's what you do.
Last question, what's the book you read most recently that you thought was fantastic or made an impression?
I've been having a tough time with fiction lately. I have not really. The world is so bizarre. Fiction just seems so ridiculous. It's so redundant, or not even close to the twists and turns we're living through right now, historically. I mean, honestly, the only thing I can think of is something I've been kind of rereading through is a William H. Gass reader that came out, I don't know if it came out last year or this year. It's a big collection of all of, you know, samples from all of his different books and writing, and it has collected a lot of magazine articles that he wrote and reviews he wrote of other things that I've never read. So he's a constant source of inspiration for me. Just can't hardly ever read any William H. Gass without wanting to write. So that's why I carry it around.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well,
Thank you.
Please come closer to the stars. Sadness is my luxury. Will you ever join the cold come before I die? Oh, wherever that be. And the glowing stars.